Welcome to In-Depth Insight, a special broadcast live here at the Texas State Capitol. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Will Dupree. State lawmakers are gathered here inside the Capitol to kick off the 89th regular legislative session. And over the next 140 days, they will spend lots of time not only debating, but also voting on new laws that will impact nearly all the 30 million Texans out there here in the state. Today, we'll look ahead to legislative priorities sure to create headlines across the state and even the country over the next 5 months. Those big items will include education, border security, health care. But first, let's get to the biggest story of the day, a story months now in the making, the vote for House Speaker.
Pursuant to the Constitution and laws of the state of Texas, I declare the Honorable Dustin Burrows of Lubbock County to be the duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives of the 89th Legislature.
As you just heard there, State Representative Dustin Burrows has won the race for House Speaker. Now, the Speaker's race came down to two main candidates, Representatives David Cook and Dustin Burrows. And it's the latest chapter in a division between two factions of Texas Republicans. That split took center stage after last session in 2023, especially when it came to issues like school vouchers, property taxes, and Attorney General Ken Paxton's impeachment. Today, we saw David Cook representing more of the right wing of the party, and Dustin Burrows took on more of the establishment of his own party. Now, we are joined here this afternoon just outside the rotunda with our Capitol correspondent, Dylan McKim, who has spent hours just inside the chamber, which is just down the hall from us. Yeah. A big day for sure. You're first covering this vote. So talk to us about how it all broke down and ultimately how Burrows won.
You know, it's a day full of ceremony and tradition, and that House chamber was busting at the seams because of how many people were actually inside. All 150 members plus their families all in there, which is that fun. You know, you'd like to see the families out there taking pictures with their kids and grandchildren, but then it's like, okay, now get out. We have some business to take care of because really all the way up into that vote, we did not know what was going to happen or who was going to win this election for Speaker of the House, and it came down to three different nominees, two Republicans and a Democrat, and it really down between Dustin Cook and Dustin Burrows. And it only took 2 rounds. There was even talk that it could be infinity rounds, that how long will this take until we get a final answer. Thankfully for all of us here, it only took 2 rounds, and now we know that Dustin Burrows will be the Speaker of the House.
And it looked like that many of the Democrats here in the Texas House ended up voting for that other Democrat in the beginning, but then switched some of their votes to support Burrows.
And you know, even some Democrats during the nomination speeches to throw your support behind one of the candidates, they even got up to speak for Dustin Burrows. So you did see that he had some pull with Democrats, but so did Representative Cook. He had Representative Raymond Pena. He also put his support behind David Cook. So really, you saw two Democrats. You know, you didn't know which way they were going to go. We knew that there was a split in the Republican Party, and neither one had a Republican majority to get the 76 votes needed. It just appears here that Dustin Burrows had more of that Democratic support.
So things have wrapped up in both chambers at this point in the afternoon. It's a bit quieter than it was earlier today.
Gosh, it was loud.
But there were a lot of demonstrators here, some that had those red shirts on. Talk about what those said and what message they were hoping to send with the result.
You know, I don't think we can stress how big of a split in the Republican Party it was in this past couple of weeks, and the pressure that Dustin Burrows and his kind of faction in the Republican Party that they were getting from Republican leaders. I mean, they were coming after them doing attack ads, the Republican Party of Texas doing attack ads. You heard Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, the governor, saying, hey, everybody, get in line and support David Cook. He's the nominee. He got the nomination from the House GOP caucus, and they persisted, and they faced a lot of pressure, and we saw that pressure even play out again today. As you said, we saw at least 1,000 Texans come in, conservative Texans with those shirts on. They were busting, and they were going to those Republican holdouts who were going to vote for Burrows to speak to them and say, get your vote in line. We don't want Dustin Burrows as Speaker of the House. Of course, that pressure did not work. And then his acceptance speech, Dustin Burrows really, you know, even after facing all that pressure and this split and divide, he really had a message of unity with all Democrats, all Republicans. He says, my door will always be open. Everybody has a voice who wants their opinion heard. And that's what I'm sure most members will be hoping for as we go into this session.
Well, Dylan, I know it's an exciting day for everybody out there. Thank you for covering it. And I know you've got a story to put together for later today on KXAN News.
We'll see you at 6.
Yeah, send you on your way for that. But thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Well, we are now going to look ahead to the issues that lawmakers are expected to prioritize this session. Already they have filed bills that range from health care to property rights. This session expects several bills filed related to a broad range of education topics. Our reporter Kelly Wiley will join us shortly to break down those for us. But first, we want to go now to our KXAN evening anchor, Daniel Marine, who is live in the studio right now, who will be heading up our Capital Context series for this session. Daniel, thanks for being with us, and we want to talk about the background on some of the bills related to border policy. That, of course, is going to be a big topic of discussion, but border and immigration have been hot-button issues in the legislature for years now. But this year, there's another amplifying factor. We got to talk about President-elect Donald Trump, who's going to take office in a few days.
That's right, Will, and we expect border and immigration issues to be front and center this session, specifically because of Donald Trump's return to the White House. So there will be some big things coming out of Washington when it comes to the border under the new administration. And Texas Republicans really see this, Will, as kind of an opportunity. We recently spoke with Abraham George. He is the chair of the Republican Party in Texas, and he told us his party wants to put border policy in place at the state level this session while Trump is in office. George told us the Texas GOP wants to capitalize on another Trump White House, putting policy in place that would secure the border the way they would like it, just in case a Democrat is elected president in the future and opens the border wide open. That's a quote. Those are his words, Will.
Well, Daniel, some of the Republicans out there are pushing for a border force here in Texas, but there were a lot of lawmakers here in this building that have plenty of other ideas to add to the border security conversation. So what have we seen so far in that direction?
Well, so far, more than 30 bills related to the border and immigration policy have been filed. They include Senator Bob Hall's bills to create a Texas Department of Homeland Security, and Senator Brandon Creighton, he has a bill that would allow the state to use eminent domain to seize private land to build a border wall. And then other bills that we've seen filed by House Republicans focus on cooperation between states and federal authorities. One of those bills filed by Representative Ryan Guillen of Rio Grande City, that would allow the Texas governor to enter into agreements with Mexico. And we'll also, of course, we'll be keeping an eye on what this all means for Governor Abbott's Operation Lone Star at the border. With a Trump White House spending a lot more money on border security, could Operation Lone Star's funding perhaps maybe be diverted to other needs across the state? So we'll keep a watch out for that. Will.
I appreciate that so much, Daniel, and thanks again for joining our special here today. Now, education is also expected to take center stage this legislative session, from school choice to parents' rights and districts pushing yet again for increased public education funding. We are joined this afternoon here at the Capitol with KXAN investigator Kelly Wiley. Kelly, I appreciate you being with us too. We want to start with school choice because that will be a very top priority for legislators. The dynamics are already a little bit different than last session. Talk about that.
Well, first, there's certainly unfinished business when it comes to Governor Abbott's push for education savings accounts and also the general public education push for more funding. The landscape right now is a lot of school districts have passed deficit budgets. Everything costs more. They haven't seen an increase in the basic allotment since 2019. And they came to voters, a lot of school districts, asking for money in the way of tax rate increases to offset those costs. Last year, we saw a standoff, right, between advocates of school choice and those that felt that any sort of voucher-like program, education savings accounts would be detrimental to public school funding. But you are right that the dynamics are different. Governor Abbott has been public about the fact that he has enough votes to get education savings accounts through. So really now it's a matter of what does that plan look like. We know of 2 House bills that have been filed that would create education savings accounts in Texas. But the details of those plans are different, from the amount of money that would be allocated to each student who is participating in that program to what they would be able to use those funds on. There's even one of the bills even has a provision that would give a percentage of money to school districts for where the participating student resides. So there's a lot there, and it'll be interesting to see what gets passed, what details change in those plans and what new plans come forward.
So much to follow, obviously, with that, with just this first day. There are more than 100 bills filed right now that would impact public education in some way. Another theme we're seeing, though, is about parental rights.
Yes.
Talk about that, too.
So, yeah, there's a couple of bills right now that are talking about, in some way, parental rights. There's one bill that would create a handbook on parental rights and would educate school board members on parental rights. There's another bill that would talk about a inspector general for the Texas Education Agency that would investigate complaints for parents. And even in some of these bills that are talking about parental rights, we're seeing provisions that also extend to what can be taught in school. So not teaching about sexual orientation or gender identity. So there's a lot there, and it's definitely a theme, a larger theme that we're going to have our eye on.
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks again for joining us for In-Depth Insight here live at the Texas State Capitol. So moving forward, we are picking up now on more of those investigations that our team at KXAN has tackled that have now sparked legislation introduced this very session. So we are here with Josh Hinkle, a KXAN investigator and the host of State of Texas. Josh, you are no stranger to these halls here.
That's right. This is my 9th session since 2009 and a lot of special sessions in between.
Well, who's counting, right?
Right.
But some of the bills that we're mentioning there related to investigations that you and your team have done have the potential of impacting so many people out there. In fact, all the Texans that live here in the state. So there's one in particular that you wanted to talk about related to death investigations and how those are handled.
That's right. We've been investigating how counties specifically handle death investigations. Of the 254 counties in Texas, only 14 counties have a medical examiner. Now, most use a 200-year-old system where a justice of the peace, which is an elected position with little training and no forensic expertise to investigate how someone died. JPs can send bodies to counties with medical examiners for an autopsy, but that can be very costly and often doesn't happen. And in case you were wondering, the state system that we have right here is not like anything else in the entire United States.
You mentioned that discrepancy and the difference in that. Why don't more counties have a medical examiner?
Well, it is a large financial investment for one, and the requirement to have an ME is only a requirement for counties that have populations of 2.5 million or more. There are counties that have not hit that population threshold that actually have made the decision to move forward with an ME office, but again, that number that has a medical examiner's office right now is just 14. However, we did discover a handful of counties in North Texas have entered into a regional agreement to share a medical examiner's office and the costs associated with it. In fact, one state lawmaker, Senator Tan Parker, who's dealt with ME legislation in the past, told us he wanted to explore ways to possibly open that type of agreement to more counties so they could rely on an ME's expertise. It would be a county's decision to make, of course, but certainly a step toward modernizing this system that we've had around for many decades.
Has there been any legislation introduced so far to change that this time?
Well, we're still waiting and watching, of course, so Senator Tan Parker, that's a message to you. We're looking to see what you're going to be doing, but there has been another lawmaker that's filed some other legislation that's related to our investigation, specifically in the way that justices of the peace are disciplined and then they're sanctioned after that.
Okay, so you all will be following that specifically, but what about everything else that's happening during the session, because there will be so much to talk about?
Well, there are several ways that you can keep track of everything that we're doing with KXAN and State of Texas specifically beyond our newscasts and our website. Each week, the political program I host, State of Texas, airs on Sunday mornings at 8:30 on KXAN and again at 9:30 p.m. on the CW Austin. We also have our newsletter, the KXAN newsletter sign-up page that you can actually get the latest in Texas politics. And we have a podcast also for State of Texas in case you like to listen to your political news.
So many different ways to keep in touch. But Josh Hinkle, we will see you this Sunday on State of Texas. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back after this. During this legislative session, the Texas House of Representatives will feature plenty of new, fresh perspectives after 32 brand new lawmakers took their oaths of office today. Their first official day on the job already came with one looming task: deciding who to support to lead the chamber as House Speaker. Even more consequential votes and potentially contentious debates still lie ahead over these next 140 days. And our guest this afternoon will be among that group taking on those challenges for the very first time. So this afternoon we are joined by Representative Caroline Fairley. She is from Amarillo and at 26 years old is the youngest Republican ever elected to the Texas House. So Representative, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you making the time after everything today to do this.
Well, of course. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It may be a loaded question to ask about all the feelings that are coming into today, but the one thing you had to vote on was the House Speaker.
Yes, sir.
You ended up supporting State Representative Dustin Burrows. Why him?
Well, I came out in support of him this morning simply because, one, in the Panhandle, having the representation that we have, it is so important. And Speaker Burrows, he is from the Lubbock area, and so I know that him coming into this position, it will help our area, the Panhandle, have more leverage and influence in the Texas House. And the other part is I fundamentally believe he will lead the House in conservative ways. I think we'll pass strong policy, and I'm excited to work under his leadership this year.
Okay, so that's one vote that's under your belt now.
One vote, many more to go.
There are so many other proposals and legislation that you would like to pursue, including limiting cell phone use for students in classrooms.
Yes,
How does that fit into your priorities for this session?
Well, several reasons. One, HB 1481, what it does is it proposes prohibiting smart devices on school campuses. We all know that we care about our kids focusing on math, science, reading, and sending them to school to actually learn education. And so the focus on that is protecting kids from seeing things on their phones that they shouldn't be exposed to at school, and bringing them back to understanding the basics of education. Over 60% of parents support this. 12 states have already passed this, and so I feel very confident that we have a lot of support behind it, and looking forward to working with other members to get it passed.
Yeah, we'll track that for sure too,
Yes,
among
sir.
all the other things out there. So you were also from the Panhandle. That area suffered from the largest wildfire in our state's history just last year. As you're talking to your constituents out there, what are they telling you about some of the changes that they think need to happen to either help them or prevent something like this from happening again?
Well, that's a great question. The reality is these wildfires, they happen every 4 to 6 years, and so the focus is on this next time when a wildfire does hit. How do we prevent and protect those in the Panhandle? And so there's been discussion about having and owning our own aircraft fleet. I'm definitely a proponent and supportive of that. I know those are going underway, so we'll see how those works out. But I went to the Pampa wildfire hearing, and Representative King, he's in Canadian. He has been spearheading everything when it comes to wildfire and making sure that we are appropriately equipping those in the Panhandle to fight these, because it truly is devastating. I mean, we have a lot of farmers and ranchers who have dedicated years and months to getting ready for their crop, and if we're to all go, it is devastating. So we've got to be mindful about legislation that's effective and also helpful to the Panhandle when it comes to wildfires.
All right, before we let you go, I mentioned there you're the youngest Republican ever elected to the Texas House.
Yes.
What was it that motivated you to run for that position? Because some people, your colleagues, will wait quite a while to be able to do that. So what motivated you to do that?
Well, I worked in Washington, D.C., and I really got exposed to politics there and wanted to get involved in Texas. And the reality is I believe conservatives in my generation, we have to step up for the future of Texas, for the future of our kids and the next generation. I love Texas, and I'm looking forward to raising, hopefully, my kids and grandkids here and having a seat at the table and a fresh perspective, and working with colleagues who are much older and learning from them and bridging that gap. So several reasons, but mainly that my generation, we have to get involved in politics.
Nice. Well, I want to tell you again, congratulations for making it here, being sworn into the 89th regular session. Thanks again for joining us, Representative Fairley. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Reemphasize to the Bernard family, what happened to you was a tragedy, and it shouldn't happen again in the state of Texas. And I'm going to do everything I can within my power to make sure it doesn't happen again.
When a car slammed into an Austin emergency room, killing the driver and injuring 5 others, KXAN's investigators dug into the safety concerns surrounding a hospital without any security barriers at its entrance. That investigation directly led to one bill filed this session aimed at protecting patients. We're joined here this afternoon by KXAN investigator Matt Grant, who was the reporter behind many of these investigative pieces that have come along the way. But Matt, this measure in particular could make medical facilities here in the state safer.
Right. Well, just during the last legislative session, our investigations led to a new law aimed at protecting patients from bad doctors. Now, a new measure has been introduced designed to protect patients from a surprising but common problem. Next month marks the 1-year anniversary since a drunk driver crashed into St. David's North Austin Medical Center, killing herself and seriously injuring 5. Our investigations found more than 400 similar incidents across the country since 2014. Often this happens because drivers are distracted, they're distressed, they're confused. In some cases, though, it's intentional. Last month, the Austin City Council unanimously passed an ordinance in response to our reporting that now requires crash-tested security barriers called bollards at all new hospitals, urgent care clinics, and standalone emergency rooms. And existing facilities would have to do the same if they expand, if they need a new permit in the future, for example. But now Democratic State Senator Royce West of Dallas, he wants to go even further.
What is a part of State Senator Royce West's plan?
Well, in response to our reporting last month, he introduced Senate Bill 660. If it passes this session, what it would do is it would require bollards at most hospitals in the state, new and existing, just so long as they're located near an area with vehicular traffic. Now, Senator West introduced this bill in response to our reporting on the Bernard family who were injured in that February 13th crash in Austin. West said what happened to them is a tragedy that shouldn't happen again in Texas, and he told me, quote, he's going to do everything and I can in my power to make sure it doesn't happen again to anyone else.
It's obviously too early to tell whether that bill will gain much traction here in this building, but have you heard anything from any hospitals here in our area, and whether or not the terror attack in New Orleans will factor into this debate too?
That's a good question. No indication that this is going to be broadened out just yet, but obviously security is a national issue right now, so it's likely that this could come up in some form or fashion this session in some way, right? The whole country is talking about bollards right now after New Orleans. In terms of local reaction, St. David's gave kind of a neutral response. They just said that they will comply with any new legal or regulatory requirements. Other organizations, we've reached out to a number of medical organizations, and they kind of run the gamut. The Texas Hospital Association today told me that these kind of decisions should be left to individual hospitals, and they are not in favor of a blanket mandate. The Texas Medical Association president, though, says this sounds like a good idea, something he wants to look into further, perhaps meet with Senator West, and says, you know, he supports anything that would protect patients. And this bill is certainly something that Senator West and others feel would do just that.
All right. Investigator Matt Grant, thank you again for all your reporting about this and for tracking this legislation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
On the first day of filing, Texas lawmakers set a record. More than 1,500 bills introduced in one day. Since then, another 800 have been filed, and thousands more are expected during the 2025 regular session. Here are a few that stood out to us. Affordability is the key word when it comes to property rights. Ideas for how to bring down home prices range from reducing the cost of property taxes and insurance to banning foreign investment in real estate. At least 156 bills have been filed related to construction. Transgender Texans remain in the minds of a few Republican legislators. Some proposals target transgender adults' transition-related medicine and their ability to change the sex marker on their government paperwork. Restrooms and the sex of those who use them are also a focus of some legislators. How to codify biological sex in Texas law could also be in the spotlight this session. Meanwhile, House Bill 1709, also known as the Texas Responsible Artificial Intelligence Governance Act, aims to regulate artificial intelligence in the state. Filed by Texas Representative Giovanni Capriglione, it would require companies to reveal their AI usage, put in safeguards to protect personal data in AI systems, and create guidelines to prevent bias, discrimination, and misuse of the technology.
State Senator Paul Bettencourt and a bipartisan group of lawmakers filed a bill this session to expand access to misconduct records. This came after a KXAN investigation exposed gaps in how the state looks into the backgrounds of people who work with children. One of our investigators, Kelly Wiley, is back here joining us to talk a little bit more about this. So, Kelly, explain what you mean by expanding access.
Well, let's go back a little bit. Last session, lawmakers passed a plan that they believe offers a better solution to warning schools and other child welfare agencies of state workers who have a history of misconduct. And so the bill that they passed then would have combined a bunch of misconduct records from state agencies like the Texas Education Agency, HHSC, ISD, the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, combined them all in one search engine. Now, that search engine is not complete, but this new bill that's proposed would expand who has access to that. Specifically, it would expand it to contractors who hire employees that then get assigned to work on school campuses.
So why is it important for contractors to have that access?
Well, that's kind of where our investigation comes in. We had our investigation focused on a case out of Lee County and Travis County. And this was a former juvenile corrections officer with TJJD who had been hired to work as a tutor at an Austin ISD campus. And we found he was hired despite the fact that he had been investigated by the Texas Juvenile Justice Department for sexual misconduct, and in fact had been, the Office of Inspector General for TJJD had found that he had had an inappropriate relationship with the youth. And so the question becomes, how was he then hired to work as a tutor for Austin ISD after all of that? And what we found is it was a third-party contractor that actually hired him, Austin Partners in Education, and we found that they really would not have had access to the system that TJJD has for tracking misconduct. And furthermore, they told us, this agent, Austin Partners in Education, that he didn't even list on his resume that he'd worked there. So they had no reason to even call the agency. And so this basically makes it so there's one search engine with all of the state's misconduct records in it. You can just search a name. And now if this bill were to pass, there would be more agencies, specifically these contractors that are putting workers on school campuses, that also could use this tool.
So in addition to that, we know that lawmakers are also looking at creating a uniform system to track truancy, which you've also reported extensively about, and it follows one of your investigations. So where does that stand?
So our investigation essentially found that there is no state agency that's tracking what happens in truancy court for students. That means court orders that judges might issue. That also means the outcomes. Did it work? Did it get the student to come back to class? None of that's really being tracked after or during a truancy court hearing. And so we heard back from Senator Royce West, who said this is a priority for him to figure out how this is working and what the better solutions are. We also heard from Senator Judith Zaffirini, who said she is committed to working with her colleagues to figure out a uniform truancy tracking system. She believes we'll have a better idea of what's going on, and if these truancy hearings are working, what they can do to change it. And so no bill has been filed on that yet that would specifically track what's going on in these truancy hearings, but we've heard at least that they're committed to figuring it out.
Well, Kelly, we look forward to your updates about all of this over the next 140 days. So appreciate you again being with us.
Thank you so much.
On the first day of a new session at the Texas Capitol, it does help to understand who controls the levers of power. This time, the Republicans can keep steering the agenda with larger majorities in both chambers. Since last session in 2023, the GOP did gain 2 seats in the Texas House and 1 in the state Senate. The Democrats face a bit of a steeper hill to climb to push for their priorities, so this afternoon we wanted to hear more about how one member aims to do that. This afternoon, we are joined by State Senator Molly Cook. She is a Houston Democrat, and this is her first official session since she won election back in May last year. Senator, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Will.
How are you feeling about today?
I'm feeling amazing. Our families are here, our constituents came in to see a historic and momentous occasion, and we're looking forward to working hard this session.
So your background is working as an emergency room nurse. How does that then guide your work in determining what kind of priorities you want to pursue here in office?
I tell people that I'm really taking my practice from the bedside to the Capitol. So instead of one patient at a time, I have 950,000 patients at a time, or 28 million patients at a time.
Yeah.
Everything about my work in the emergency room informs our work here.
Is there a specific piece of legislation that you tie to that experience and want to highlight?
Well, I'm very excited about the first 3 bills that we've filed. Okay. So SB 270 is a study of what maybe can we bury the power lines in some of the metropolitan areas of Texas. And after knocking on doors to check on seniors when the power went out after both the derecho and Hurricane Beryl, I clocked in at the ER and I saw those same patients and their struggles to breathe, to stay warm or to stay cool, get the food and medicine that they needed. So I'm very excited to say we're going to find out what we need to figure out if we can bury the power lines and keep the power on.
So, if I understand correctly, when you took office, that was the same day as the derecho.
We were actually, my swearing-in ceremony was in the path of the tornado. Yeah.
Memorable, to say the least.
To say the least.
For sure. Now, you also are pursuing a number of pieces of legislation there. Are there some changes that you would like to see other than maybe burying power lines that is tied to that disaster response from the derecho or even Hurricane Beryl, because that also affected so many in your district?
Yeah, absolutely. SB 271 will also help to prioritize turning the power back on if folks rely on an elevator to get into their homes. And what we saw over and over again is that seniors were trapped on the top floors of their living facilities. Their families couldn't get to them, they couldn't get down. Some of them even had to call the fire department just so that they could get out to get, what they needed. And so we want to get the power back on for them as soon as possible. And then SB 272 will add a little bit of accountability when the PUC is evaluating resiliency plans to make sure that the companies like CenterPoint are actually meeting the needs of the most vulnerable Texans.
I want to look a little broadly now. Because you are in the minority party in this state Senate, what does a successful session look like to you?
Oh, I love that question. I think a lot of it is, how do we take care of even our team internally? Are we building a pipeline that develops talent in Texas for folks who really care about life-saving policy and know how to get it passed? And then I think all of my colleagues will share with you that they've made very meaningful changes to policies. Now, whether or not you get to put your name on a bill and pass something huge, but you do have a life-saving impact on the policies that do get passed, and it's important, especially as a nurse, to be in the room for those conversations.
Additionally, in addition to all of that, when you took office, you represented a first. You were the first out LGBTQ plus member of the state Senate. That particular body, so many bills and restrictions for that community came out of the Senate 2 years ago. I would imagine that a lot of people may be turning to you to be a voice for the community in this session. So how are you planning to take on that responsibility? Because that is a lot.
It is such an incredible honor, and I always start by showing gratitude to then Senator Barbara Jordan, who of course was gay and couldn't be out because the times were not what they are now. And it's no secret that the last legislative session was filled with vicious attacks on our community. And I'm very proud to get to symbolize the resiliency of that community in Houston and Harris County. They actually are sending not just me, but also Lauren Ashley Simmons. So two queer women organizers are coming to Austin to hold the line and protect our community.
Well, State Senator Molly Cook, we appreciate you taking time on your first day of the session to be here with us to answer some questions. And I know there will be many more conversations to be had in the future. So thank you again.
Thank you, Will.
Appreciate it. And that is just the start of our coverage of this legislative session. During the next 140 days, we will be here at the Capitol, capturing every moment, following the bills that make headlines and sharing all those details with you along the way. Now, if you missed any of this broadcast or would like to catch up with the latest Texas political headlines, head to KXAN.com. Well, that will do it for in-depth insight here at the Capitol. Thanks again for being with us. I'm Will Dupree. Take care.